Place one foot on the wide plain of death, and some grand immensity sounded on that emptiness. Rumi. In fitting tribute to this film and the work of Andrew Harvey, I'm Tim McHenry. I'm the producer here at the Woodman Museum of Art, and welcome. This is one of 3 film premieres that we are presenting in the context of our Talks About Nothing, which is a brochure which has been on your seat. The first was Tenzin Finsock's extraordinary experimental film called 4 Rivers, which is all about beginnings, the starts, the sources of the 4 great rivers of the Tibetan Plateau, which has a second screening on the 12th of December. And the third is called The Sound of Insects, which will be premiered in December, on the 22nd of December. And it's a Swiss film about a hunter who discovers a desiccated corpse in the forest. And the corpse is accompanied by a notebook in which every day of the human's march towards death has been documented, deliberate starvation. It's a really fascinating treatise about how to approach death and nothingness. Today, we're of course premiering Marion Woodman, Dancing in the Flames, by Adam Graydon Reed. And I'm delighted that we're co-presenting this afternoon and this film premiere with V-Day and the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies, and its co-founder, Elizabeth Lesser, is here to do the honors this afternoon. Elizabeth, I'm delighted. This is your debut at the Woodman Museum of Art. I hope you make the most of it. Thank you so much. Elizabeth Lesser, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the Rubin, even though I don't work at the Rubin. Welcome anyway. I've had the honor and the privilege for 33 years as the co-founder of Omega Institute, which is a retreat and conference center in Rhinebeck, New York. I've had the honor of meeting and researching and knowing and working with and studying with some of the greatest thinkers and authors and artists, social activists of our times. And it's been so inspiring to have this work, so exciting and enlightening. And it also can be very confusing and disillusioning even, because so many of the hundreds and hundreds of faculty people I've worked with are, very human, just like us, and have the same problem we all have, which is we know a lot, and we dabble in wisdom, but it's so hard to live it. It's so hard to walk it every day. And every now and then, I get to meet one of those rare people who is so extraordinary. And what I mean by that is what extraordinary means, extraordinary. Someone who is so truly human, so genuinely human, and so unabashedly and unafraid to be a full human being, that she transcends humanity and becomes this goddess and becomes the kind of person who lights up a path in the forest for all of us. And one of these few people I've had the honor to meet and then study with for years is Dr. Marion Woodman, and you are lucky now to be seeing a premiere of this film about her, especially on Halloween, because she is the ultimate person who makes us comfortable with death. The film is created by a brave human being, someone to take on Marion Woodman's work and translate it for the world. I tip my hat to him. Adam Graydon Reed, who is a well-known director and actor and author and screenwriter who hails from Marion's beloved Canada. So he's going to introduce the film to us. Please welcome Adam Graydon Reed.
Thank you so much for that, Elizabeth. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. It's really an honor to present this film here at the Rubin. Thank you, Tim McHenry, for inviting us to screen here and providing this wonderful and sacred and beautiful space. And thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Eve. Thank you so much to both of you for co-sponsoring this event. But not only for co-sponsoring this event, but for now for many months being such generous supporters with your words, your enthusiasm, your thoughts. It's really meant a lot to me because I've been kind of making this film in a bit of a, you know, when you make a film, it took about 2.5 years to edit. You're in this, you know, this almost a black hole, really. And so it's really important to get people like Eve and like Elizabeth their feedback. And I just, you know, sent it to them. And I didn't, for Eve, we didn't have a phone number. I didn't even know if it was the right address. Just took it from Marion. I said, Marion, who do you know? Let's get it to some people. And I sent it off to Eve and wrote a letter and got a phone call. And the same thing with Elizabeth. So it really is, thank you so much. I have notes. In 2006, I attended a conference two conferences that would change my life. One was in San Francisco, and it was with Jack Kornfield, a Buddhist teacher, and Marion Woodman. And I went down with my wife. We attended it, and I didn't know anything about Marion. My wife knew about Marion. But I knew about Jack, and on the way on the plane, I was reading her book, and I was, well, this is really speaking to me, and in a huge, a very important way. I was shocked. I wasn't expecting this at all, just her words. And then when I saw Marion speak, I was so bowled over by her fearlessness, her ability to be anything that she wanted. She was everything and anything that she felt like being. She's a really a whole human being. And so it was almost this prism of a person. And I just had to speak to her at the end. My wife was in tears, and I went up to her. Crowds kind of just, you know, got through the crowd, and it was almost like a reunion, really, of sorts. It felt immediately that we had a connection, an old connection. I like to say it was like discovering an old friend. And she said, and we talked, and she said, "Oh, you must come to Guelph, Ontario. I'm doing another talk there. You know, you're from Canada. You should come." And I'm doing it with this wonderful, wonderful man named Andrew Harvey. I said, "Oh, okay." And so we went to Guelph, Ontario, of course, and we watched her speak with Andrew. And if you've ever seen Marion Woodman speak, you know it's an amazing, incredible thing to witness. If you've ever seen Andrew Harvey speak, it's like, it's hard to describe because it's just this fire. And the two of them together, it was like watching a silent lightning storm, you know, in the horizon. And then, but experiencing them it was like being electrified by that lightning storm and then being dipped into, you know, the rejuvenating minerals of a salt bath. And so I sat there at the end of this conference, and I felt something coming up inside of me, and I said, I have to speak to Marion again. I've got to talk to her. I think we have to work together somehow. I didn't know how. And of course, that other part of me, the judge part, the critic, said, no, who do you think you are? Like, what are you going to say? What do you mean you're going to work with her? And so I waited in line with the 200 women that were there. And 10 guys, you know, yeah, hey. And I got to the front, and I said, you know, Marion, we recognize each other, and I said, well, it's such an honor to be here again, and I feel like we're supposed to work together somehow. And she says, oh, well, I'm not an analyst anymore. I'm not taking on any more analysts. And I said, no, I don't think that's what it's supposed to. I think there's something else. And she said, she suddenly got very serious and looked at me, and her eyes seemed to kind of almost sharpen. And she said, okay, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Here's my home number. Listen to your dreams, and then call me 2 days after Christmas at 11 a.m. Call me 2 days after Christmas at 11. What did she say? She said, call her 2 days after Christmas at 11 a.m. And I don't know, I still didn't know how I was supposed to work with her. Then I went to the bathroom. And I walked up to the urinal and found myself side by side with Andrew Harvey. Kind of nodded to each other when we were both finished. I said, Andrew, it was such an honor. I mean, Andrew really was unbelievable to watch. I mean, he was amazing to watch and to be introduced to. And I said, thank you for that. And I said, look, Andrew, I don't want to project too much here, but it's almost like when I'm watching Marion, I'm watching Mother Earth. And Andrew said, you're not projecting anything at all. Marion is a conduit, absolute conduit to the core of the earth. She has been through the fire and she's lived to talk about it. And then he said, do you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to make a film about Marion's life. And then he left. And by then I was piecing it together. So, and I gave him my number, and by the time I spoke to Marion 2 months later, we were going to make this film. Thank you, Andrew.
My pleasure.
Thank you for your passion, your inspiration, your love, your friendship, your integrity, your honesty, your fire.
Thank you.
It was an absolute joy to work with you. And it was lovely because you were so open and so trusting, and it was really great. And the film the film had to be made with you and Marion. You'll see, it had to be done this way. He brings something out of Marion that no one else has. I'd also like to thank someone else who is here today, Emily Hubley. Emily Hubley's mother, Faith Hubley, was an Oscar-winning animator in the 70s. I saw the animation and I knew, and I described to Marion that there needed to be a painterly aspect to the film. When I discovered Faith's images, I contacted Emily, and Emily's support, your family's support, the film would not be what it is without your generosity and belief in this film. So thank you, Emily. And thank you, Faith. Really, that's a biggie, because I felt Faith was with us the whole time, with me certainly the whole time as I edited the film. And I just want to thank Judith Harris, a woman who really, without her generosity, the film would not have been possible. Another woman that helped in the end was Darian Pictet, who was also instrumental in helping to fund this film, and of course, the Marion Woodman Foundation. Marion and Ross, I've been speaking to them almost every day. They are very, very sorry that they can't be here today. But one thing that is important for Marion is that before we watch the film, that everyone gets into their bodies. So she would like to ask, and I would like to ask for her, for everyone now to just wiggle around in your seats. Wiggle around. If you need to stretch your arms, stretch your arms. If you need to rotate your ankles, stretch, do what you need to do. Slip into your spine, and as the lights go down, please listen to your breath. Let yourself sink in and enjoy. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Of people around the world, but she's also brought us deep into suffering, into the suffering of others, so that we can take the pain and transform it into healing and into light. If there's anyone I know who is living so much of what Marion talked about, it's Eve Ensler, who is someone who when I hitched my wagon to her energy, my life has really exploded into meaning and into depth. So I'm very grateful to introduce both of these friends of mine to you, the wonderful and mad Andrew Harvey, and the beautiful and soulful Eve Ensler.
Hi, darling.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Are our microphones working? Yes. Okay.
Is this on? Yes, it's on. Eve and I had a wild and wonderful lunch before we came to see the film together, and we are beloved friends. And we thought that we'd begin, really, by speaking about Marion and what Marion means to us. What does Marion mean to you, Eve?
Marion means so many things, but I think I've seen this movie like 6 times, and I've just recovered from uterine cancer, and I'm just emerging. And this film has been like with me through my whole recovery. I just watch it periodically to just feed. But I think what Marion means to me is the bravery of going all the way into the essence of who you are.
Yes.
And freeing all those chains that prevent us from being fully realized. And this time when I watched the film, I'm just so moved by her hands. Just so moved by her hands, because her hands they're like illumined birds, you know? They're just like floating, and they're so reflective of the freedom that is her, you know, and that she endows us with, you know. What about you?
Well, I remembered 3 things that I had forgotten, and they seem to speak directly to what you're saying, because for me, Marion has been a revelation of what a person is when everything but essence has been burnt away. And the first time I met Marion, we fell wildly in love, and we were staying in the same place, and I thought, well, this poor old lady must go to bed. So we had a glass of wine, and we ended up literally talking all night until 6 o'clock in the morning. And at about 5:30, I was wilting, but Marion was getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And at 5:35, she told me this extraordinary story, which I'd forgotten until today, which was how that on that Indian trip, through a series of very strange events, she ended up being actually worshipped as the living divine mother in a remote Indian village. They saw this white woman, grabbed her, unclothed her, wrapped her in a sari, put her on a bier, drove her into the middle of this wild place and worshipped her as the living divine mother. And I think that is actually the key to what is discovered when everything else has been taken away. And then I remembered something that happened right at the end of the filming. Because Marion and I would go into a huddle and have wild conversations after each conversation, because we were both discovering things at the same time as we were speaking, for ourselves and for each other. And I was obviously in a state of very deep meditation on Marion, because I was trying to really help her reveal what I was experiencing of her. And right at the end of the filming, I said to her, I have this very deep sense that you have been systematically crucified by the Black Madonna so that she can come almost entirely into you and inhabit you. And that your choice of the divine feminine has been a choice to go through incineration after incineration, so that at this moment that you and I are together, you really have become her. And Marion was very moved and amazed by that. Because I think what we become through the stripping of the false selves away is actually the embodied divine human. And this is the greatest mystery of all. And that was the mystery that I was really facing and living in my relationship with her. And the third thing I wanted just to talk about is a moment where I learned a huge amount from her what it is to be embodied. All of our relationship was extraordinarily loving. And we were, you can see, I think, that we're in a state of tremendous sacred excitement to be together because we were in love in the soul and are in love in the soul. It's a good place to be in love. And we were waiting for Adam to do something, and the makeup person, who was wonderful but indefatigable, came towards me, and I said, no, no, no. One of the things all my friends know about me is that I'm pretty impatient. And she turned to me and she said, very softly, she said, don't you understand the way you are with other people is the way you're actually with yourself? And nobody had ever said that to me. And it was such a perfect illustration of what she'd learned in embodiment, that really we are once you come into the state where Marion is, every other being is yourself. So you're grounded in the earth, you're awake to the transcendent, and you're relating to the other as yourself. And so that how you treat the other isn't just ethical, it's actually revelatory of how you are somewhere treating yourself, because there is no separation. And that was a tremendous teaching that flashed out of her essential self, and a teaching that I have betrayed endlessly ever since. But still remember. And what we thought we'd do next is to go through the three kinds of death that Marion interrelates so brilliantly, and the film interrelates so brilliantly. The first death is the obvious death that we are living through as a culture, the death of the death machine that we've created out of our monstrous greed and craziness and shadow, which is threatening everything. And the second death is the death process that is the birth process, this mystery of shattering and rebirth that really is the core of the universal rhythm and the great mystery of embodiment. And the third death that we were going to explore together is really better expressed as how to do the dying process in life, so as to die more and more into life. But before we do that, we both have actually had major brushes with death this year. And I would love to ask you, Eve, what have you been learning in this torrential, terrible journey into cancer, which I've had the honor of sharing a little bit with you?
You know, I was thinking during the film, and I've just been thinking over the last months what an incredible gift this process of cancer has been. And really, the humility she was talking about at the end, I was thinking, you know, what has been the greatest death? What has really died for me? And it's definitely this false sense of invincibility, you know. I had an image and an idea of myself, which I absolutely projected, which is this perfectionism, which is that I would be fine, that I could go anywhere, that I could do anything, that I was untouchable, do you know? And there was some profound part of me that actually believed this, you know? I had willed myself into believing that because very early on in my life, I faced enormous, enormous violence. And rather, I don't think I had the strength at that point to lay myself bare to that violence, because I think I would have been destroyed by it. I constructed a very false, or an idea of myself that was invincible, you know, that could just move through things, that could never be touched, and cancer was a shock. It was a shock. Everything about it, it was a shock. It was the idea that I had to stop, first of all. I was on my way to Haiti, and I couldn't go. And the first thing my doctor said to me was not, "You have cancer." He said, "You can't go to Haiti." And because he knows me. And it was the idea that there was something stopping me, stopping my will, my way, my invincibility. And that began a journey of being stopped, you know, of having to be still, and having to give up and shed and strip away this very just very elusive and not true version of myself. And at first it was incredibly painful. I didn't want people to know. I was humiliated by the cancer. I felt embarrassed. I felt it was my failure. I went through all that. And then I suddenly realized that what a gift it was. What a gift. Because all that invincibility was keeping me removed on some profound level from everything. Because I was stronger than all of it. And that made me either above things or outside of things. But it didn't make me a part of things. And I think the greatest part of this death has been I feel connected to everything. And everyone. And I'm not perfect. I'm a big fat mess, you know? And I love being a mess now. A good part of my journey has been about poop and relationships to poop. And I was laughing with Andrew today, but I think the world of the body is it's so primal, it's so basic, it's so of the earth, it's so what Marion was talking about of lying in that dark, mossy place, and it's brought me there. It just flat-bottomed me there without any possibility of removing myself. And at the beginning, I was just horrified of all the, and now I just see, you know, what a great place it is to be in that very just earthy, alive, human, messy place. And I don't want to escape it anymore. I don't want to be invincible anymore. I want to be of whatever this is. And at the same time, what I'm moved by with Marion is, it doesn't mean I've surrendered my fierceness, or I've surrendered my vitality, or I'm giving up, or I don't care. I care more than I've ever cared. I feel more angry than I've ever been. I feel more committed, more passionate, more devoted than I've ever felt. But it's not coming from being outside. It's coming from being a part of. And I can see it in everything I do, just how, even my head, you know, I went through so much of this process. Can I go out bald? Shall I not be bald? What does it mean to be bald? I'll look like a cancer patient. I look like a Martian. I look just like all the different things. And over the last 2 months, I finally realized I'm bald. This is who I am. This is what is real. This is where I am right now at this moment in time. And I actually have fuzz. And it feels like those little baby chickens. And I really like it. It's like just, I love it. And I'm not embarrassed about it anymore because I had cancer. It is real. I'm not protecting the world from knowing that because I'm not protecting me from knowing that. And I think there's so many parts. That's just the beginning of that story. That's the beginning. I think there's many aspects.
You know, we met 15 years ago and had a marvelous time, and then we connected over the years, but I met Eve again when she was in the middle of this journey, and we had a wonderful, long night conversation, and it was an amazing conversation. But listening to you, what I hear is that this dying process has made you more completely feminine. Because there was something in the way in which you crystallized around the abuse that brought out a very ferocious, willful, invulnerable masculine, which was the drive to tremendous work, and of course to tremendous work in the world that has had huge impact onto everybody, but which kept you at certain levels separate from the authentic lushness and abandon and surrender of the divine feminine, of the Black Madonna. And what this cancer seems to me to have done in the way in which you described it is to shatter that bulwark, but not in a way that took away the ferocity, but in a way that connected it, instead of it being a kind of defense against being touched, as a way of really serving, creating a world in which we are in much more molten, compassionate touch with each other. Does that make any sense to you?
That makes perfect sense. And I think so much, I think if you're raised in an environment of violence, which we all are, whether it's the world of violence or the family of violence, or I think we associate vulnerability, obviously, with weakness and with disappearance. And frankly, all I really want to do now is disappear. I mean, the idea of disappearing is just a wonderful idea to me. Just,
don't you dare disappear.
No, but I don't mean die.
You disappear
I mean disappear into things,
Yes.
blend into things, become part of things,
Yes.
you know? And I think what I've really come to understand, and I think a lot of it has to do because I went through a major operation and infections and chemo, and there's just each stage is, and my mother died in the middle of the whole process, and I just like, it was like this was stripped away, and this was stripped away, and this was stripped away, and I used to say it, but now I really believe it, that vulnerability is our greatest strength. And I gave lip service to it before, but I wasn't practicing it. And I think I really see now, like, the tyranny of patriarchy, the tyranny of patriarchy.
In oneself, yeah.
And what it's done to men in how it's made them believe that their vulnerability is their weakness, that their openness is what will destroy them. And I think what Marion so brilliantly talks about here is that those uniting of those things, but also how men, we need to support men opening to the feminine in them so that they get to live lives of vulnerability and they get to live lives of openness, which has been completely robbed from them in the patriarchal state that we're in. And what about your death experience? What happened?
Well, when we first connected again, we had a wonderful talk about being posthumous, about what it really means to face death and really face it, and suddenly come out through no grace of your own to another level. I nearly died in February because I was in South Africa working with the White Lions. You know, I have this great passion for the White Lions, and I was there. And I woke up one morning feeling absolutely amazing, told my best friend that I never felt better in my life, and then in the afternoon was in such agony I couldn't move because my gallbladder had exploded, and apparently it's very difficult for a gallbladder to explode, but I'd subjected it to so much stress over the years that I think it just exploded. And I had to be driven 3 hours across bumpy South African roads to an improbably bizarre clinic in a town called Tzaneen, which I shall never forget, where I met a half-drunk Afrikaner doctor who said, "You're dying, but just for the sheer hell of it, I'm going to save your life." He said, "You're within an hour of death. If you'd been even an hour later, you would have died." But something very extraordinary happened to me on the way there. I was in such pain that the only way to deal with it, and I know you know this process, is to really go into deepest meditation. And as I went into deepest meditation, I was no longer the body, or the body was there, but I was just the whole presence of the entire universe, holding the sun and the tires and the car and the body. And I really, for the first time at such depth, felt the eternal self, the self that has never been born and that will never die. And I felt great compassion for Andrew, because God knows I've dragged Andrew through an awful lot in this life. And I didn't mind about dying at all. I didn't mind, because I knew there was no death, and there is no death. There is death of the body, but there is no death of this, because this cannot die. And since then, I felt very, very different on every level. And I feel that's what's happening to you, is that I know from our conversations in this last 5 months just how each conversation you register another level of this very paradoxical mixture of great detachment, unlike anything else that one's ever felt, and greater concern and greater love and greater compassion, because finally you know that you won't be destroyed, whatever happens, so that you can give yourself to life at another level of abandon. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah. I mean, I think in a way it's sort of like a relationship dying. You know, I've always felt my whole life, in any relationship I've been in, that there's been part of me that's been held on reserve.
Yes.
Just held on reserve. Like, if I give this up, I could be destroyed. You know, so I will hold this back and protect myself. And we all know how ridiculous that is, because even if you're holding it back, you get destroyed anyway. But one of the things that has happened recently is I see I had the same relationship to life. That there was part of me that was going, one day I will fully appreciate everything, and I will fully love people, and I will fully give myself to this when this certain thing happens. Now, I have no idea what that certain thing was, but it would eventually happen. And it's happened, which is that I almost died. And so I feel lately like, and it sounds so corny, but there is this new preciousness to things where I feel like I'm an emotional being, and everything makes me cry. And I think really, if we were living at our full capacity, everything would make us cry. Instead, we have bought into patriarchy, which tells us, that tears are signs of weakness, that you're all over the place, that you're messy, that you're. I am an emotional creature, and that's the name of my new book. And I wrote that book when I thought about girls, and I thought about the tyranny, what girls are told about being an emotional creature, and how girls are brought up to please rather than defy or create or organize or resist, and how every single time when Marion talked about she was told she was too much, but then she found Emily Dickinson, and she could finally say, I have my passion, I have my poetry. We are all born with that passion. Right. We are all born with that intensity. And it is muted and weaned and shut down and destroyed and muted and silenced. And what I now know is if we are going to survive as a species, we have to open it. We have to rejoice in it. We have to not be afraid. We have to go the full extent of our passions, because you cannot have brilliant ideas without passion fueling them.
And this is what the death of our time really gives us an opportunity to do so. There are these two lines of Rumi which go to the core of what you're saying. He said, be grateful for the friend's tyranny, not his tenderness, so the arrogant beauty in you can become a lover that weeps. Be grateful that we live in a time in which we really have to face the full shadow and the full destructiveness of the shadow and the death, potentially, of nature, because if we can open our hearts to it, then it will really bring this infinitely more vibrant, vivid life of commitment and passion. And the arrogant beauty, the ego that's always keeping something in reserve, will become a lover that weeps, a lover of the world that weeps for pain of what we're doing to the world, weeps for wonder at the endless resilience despite all the cruelty that we're inflicting on nature, of nature, and weeps with concern for all animals and all human beings caught in this tragic death, and then weeps because it really wants to find the strength to summon up the power and the energy to start doing something real about this real death. So those two lines really go to the core of what we're experiencing, because when you stop denying and resisting what's happening and take the heartbreak and madness and chaos and grief and terror of it full on in the heart, then your heart shatters open, but you don't find paralysis and death in that shattering open. You find enormous love, enormous compassion, and a wholly different level of focused passion energy to do something from your deepest consciousness to start becoming an instrument of the birth.
And I think connected to that, I think we often don't appreciate how much our body knows and how much is in our body.
Yeah.
And if the Vagina Monologues taught me anything, because it was all about the body and being in the vagina and of the vagina and around the vagina, this process, each step of this journey, there's been something in the world happening to the earth. And in one particular part of this journey, I had a very bad abscess infection after the operation, like 16 ounces of pus inside that had to be drained. And it was at the exact same moment that the Gulf of Mexico had been, and it was unbelievable what happened, because I was obsessed with the Gulf of Mexico and the images of the birds and the images of the oil and the spill. And at one point, I couldn't determine whether oil was being, I had two bags literally pumping things out of me, and I couldn't figure out whether it was oil or whether, and I absolutely merged with the Gulf of Mexico. And at the same exact moment, my mother was dying, and all she wanted to do was go home and be by the Gulf of Mexico, which was her favorite place. So there was this convergence of my mother dying, the Gulf of Mexico, the bags draining, and I got it. It's all one. It's not separate. We're all in the same story. It's always, and our ability, how we've learned how to put things into silos, do you know, how to divide things and separate things, is what's killing us. Do you know, because once you surrender and you open yourself to that convergence, yeah, it's painful. But
it's
just
terribly
as painful to avoid it. I mean, instead, you end up drinking yourself to death or overeating or having, you know.
Writing bad books.
Writing whatever it is that one does, you know. But there's a fluidity to the pain of being open, you know.
I think it really is an initiation, though, isn't it? Mm-hmm. I think what Rumi is talking about when he talks about the breaking down of the arrogant beauty and the lover that weeps is that only the lover that weeps is in connection. The arrogant beauty is in a dark fantasy which is ultimately extremely destructive. We know where narcissism is going to end up. It's going to end up in the incineration of nature and the destruction of the human race. And we have one choice, which is to open to this great death so as to be born into radiance and passion and weeping and action, all interconnected in the way that you've been modeling for so many people for so long, but are now going to model on another level. And without intruding on your privacy, which was, of course, what I'm about to do, I think it's so important that you talked about the Gulf and your relationship between dying and the Gulf, because I know that you've been working with Congolese women who have been through tragic rape and mutilation and the worst crimes against the feminine, and that your own cancer has taken on that particular shape. So there is something that has happened to you because of the depth of your soul participation in reality. You've gone beyond being a passionately concerned person about others. You've become someone who is living that torment in the body and also transmuting it. So that the relationship between you and these amazing women whom you're building the City of Joy for in Congo has taken a quantum leap. And this is the quantum leap we're really all being asked to take. And this is why those of us who do this work go through not only so much mental suffering and heart suffering, but in the end it has to come into the body, because when the body starts to feel the agony, that's when you really, really enter the field of a wholly new kind of love in action.
And it's interesting, too, because I think for me, the journey in the Congo over the last 4 years, and the journey of loving the women of Congo and being in solidarity with the women of Congo and trying to serve and and all the work of activists, and I'm sure many in this room have done to serve the women of Congo. You know, I know that they kept me alive through this period, and I'm going to Congo on Tuesday, and I feel just, I'm going to kiss the ground in Bukavu when I get, because I never dreamed I'd ever get back there. And I feel, you know, I think we have real choices right now, and I think those of us who are brought up in the state of patriarchy, it's so hard to carve out a path. Why I respect Marion so much is that she has managed to carve out a path because she's listened to her soul, and she's abided her soul, she's heeded her soul. And I think if anything's happened for me through this journey, I see the difference between a life where one is seeking approval and where one is seeking change. Yes. And I think it's the crucial piece. And I think now everything I do, I ask myself, are you seeking approval? Are you seeking change? Why would I not go bald? Well, I might not get a date, okay? Seeking approval.
I'll date you.
Take your hat off, okay? You know, why, just what, and I think so much of the approval comes from all of us wanting to be part of the club and wanting to be part of the tribe. But in a way, at this point, it's a suicide contract.
The tribe is psychotic.
It's a suicide contract. Because to say you want to be part of the tribe means you're willing to just go that direction, which we all know is a very suicidal direction. And so I think if I've learned anything right now, it's like if you go for change, it might mean people don't approve of you, or they don't like you, or they don't write about you, or they write about you in ways you don't like, but so what? In the end, you know, I look at Marion. She is who she is. She got to grow up
She's
and
had
be
her
who
life.
she was. She had her life. She
Right.
didn't dream of another life to be living when she heard she was going to die. That was her life. And what a better thing to have happened in this span of existence than to know that you lived your life.
But the other thing is one has to be honest about what it really means to live your life. And that means to die again and again and again into deeper and deeper life. And that's what Marion is so, and you,
And
for
you.
me, so wonderfully represent. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
That was really beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're in. Everyone is invited to go upstairs now and speak with the filmmaker and with Eve and with Andrew. So let's move the party upstairs. Thank you so much for coming.
There's Donald.